Hey folks, welcome to the DoItYourselfDad channel. If you've seen any of our pool videos, you've seen a lot of this pool, but we are making a change today to this. We built an in-ground pool. Now what this video is going to be is the entire step-by-step process of how this pool came to be. Now I know this is a DIY channel, but installing a gunite in-ground pool is a little bit out of my skill set. It's actually a lot of it out of my skill set. So we hired a contractor to put in this pool. So what this video is going to be is a step-by-step so you know what to expect if you decide to put in an in-ground pool. I'm going to go over everything we went through, any of the little hiccups we hit along the way, so you can make an informed decision so you know what you're getting yourself into if you decide to do something like this. So the first step in your pool building process is not starting with a shovel or signing a contract. It should be right here on the computer. And that's because you've got to find some contractors. Now, I would never go with the first quote or the only quote. I would get a minimum of 3, maybe even more, because this is a major expense. Besides buying your house, a pool is probably one of the most expensive things you're gonna do. So find a bunch of reputable contractors. And I would start by going places like Angie's List and like Nextdoor, even though Nextdoor is a horrible website. You're gonna have to sort through people complaining about the neighbor's kids doing burnouts and intersections and dogs off leash. But you can put up a post asking people for their recommendations on pool contractors. You're gonna get some great recommendations. You're probably also gonna get some horror stories, but it's gonna give you something to start off from. Then what I would do is I would spend some more time online looking up pools and getting some ideas about pools. You might even jump on Reddit, the pool subreddit, and following along there and getting some ideas and recommendations. So when you call those contractors out to give you a quote, you can actually give them what you want, and it gives them something to jump off of. Now, the other thing you should be doing on here or somehow is figuring out how the heck you're gonna pay for this thing, because pools are not cheap. I'll tell you in a second how much I paid for mine so you have an idea, but pools are not cheap, so figure out a way to pay for it. Either go on there, find some loans, sell a kidney, I don't know what you're gonna do, but figure out a way to pay for that pool. When the contractors come out, you wanna be really thorough with them and make sure that they understand what you want. And that's what I ran into with my contractors, was I had several come out, and the first 2 contractors didn't even really listen to what I wanted. They just started giving me a quote, and it was a really rough quote. I don't want a rough quote. I want a pretty exact number so I know what I'm working with. And what finally happened was the contractor that I went with, Swings Creations here in California, they sat down and listened to me. And we really boiled down what I wanted, what I needed, and what I didn't need. And we came up with the exact pool that I wanted in the price range that I was comfortable with. So talking about cost, I'm just gonna be straight up with you with how much this thing cost. And you'll see in the video, what I built was not a very big pool. It's what a lot of people call a spool or a splash pool or a play pool. It's around 5,500 gallons, 55 to 6,000 gallons. And I paid $57,000 for that pool. Now that was everything from getting the equipment in, digging the hole, all the labor, all the materials, the pumps, everything. And that's a pool without a heater. Heaters are gonna cost you a little bit more, but that's how much I paid for that. Now I did do a lot more concrete work in the backyard, so that cost more. So there was more on top of that initial pool cost, and that was because I decided to finish off my side yard, put in additional gates and stuff like that. So just be prepared for the amount of money that you're gonna be spending on this pool project. Now let's get into the actual build. So now that you've signed your life away to a contractor and figured out how the heck you're gonna pay for this thing, it's time for the process to start. And it starts with the ugly stuff, which is demolition. And understand that when you're doing a project like this, they have to get all the heavy equipment to your backyard to actually make things work, which means other sections of your property or your yard may very well be impacted. In our case, they had to access the backyard from the front yard going down one of my side yards. Now, conveniently, the side yard was already trashed. It had to get redone anyway, so it gave me an excuse to redo the side yard as well. Once access was gained to the backyard was leveled out, and the rough shape of the pool was sprayed in. Now, this is when you need to really start keeping an eye on things. I noticed when this shape was sprayed out in our yard that it was not quite the shape that was agreed upon, and it was a little bit smaller. So I actually had him come out and remark the shape, giving us a little bit larger of a Baja step. Once the initial shape has been established, that's when the digging begins. Now, one thing to remember when you're looking at the shape of your pool that they've actually laid out and are digging is that the hole that they're making is going to be larger than the actual pool itself. The hole that they're making is to the outside of the concrete and the gunite and all the plumbing. So the hole itself is larger. So keep that in mind when you're looking at the shape of the pool and the size of the hole that's being made. And if you're thinking to yourself, man, that pool doesn't look very big, you're right. My pool is not very big. My pool is a little over 5,500 gallons, which is very small by pool standards, but it's exactly what we wanted. So that's something you're going to have to think about and look into when you're designing your pool is how big of a pool do you actually want, and then do the cost benefit analysis, because obviously the larger the pool, the more expense. Once the hole has been dug, then it's time for the rebar. And this is something I would recommend you keeping a close eye on when the rebar is going in and making sure they're actually using enough rebar. Now, my contractors did a fantastic job with rebar, but I've heard horror stories of contractors skimping on rebar and then having structural problems with the pool later on. After the rebar has gone in, the plumbing starts happening, and that's when all the pipes, first the drainage pipes, that's what the big pipes are right here, and then also all the pipes and plumbing that's going to be running your pumps and filters. Now, I do want to note, this is taken from one of my security cameras, and I did have permission from the pool company and the guys that are doing the work to get these videos and put them up. So I'm not weirdly spying on them. This is all legit and above board. Now, something I would really highly recommend during this process is go out and take a lot of pictures or a lot of photographs. And the reason I recommend that is because all this plumbing is going to be buried after the fact. And if you ever have a problem in the future, having footage of where everything went into the ground is going to help you, or whoever is helping you later, do the repairs. Instead of having to guess where to dig, they're going to know where to dig based on your photographs. So at this point, you can see we've got the hole dug, the rebar's in, the rebar's all tied, we've got the bonding wire going around it, and all of the piping, the plumbing is in the pool. And this is the point where we got our first inspection. Good news, we passed our first inspection, which means tomorrow is the gunite. And that's really the first layer of concrete that's going to go in here. If you haven't seen gunite put in, it's a pretty interesting process. Essentially, you got a couple concrete trucks that pull up on the street, cement mixers, and a pumping truck. The pumping truck pumps the concrete through these lines and into the backyard, where they spray it at high pressure into your pool form. This high pressure allows them to get the concrete in all the nooks and crannies and also get it all the way up the walls. Once this is in, then they can actually start smoothing out the surface of the pool. This is a very loud process, so neighbors, sorry. The gunite has to be kept damp while it's drying. That's why there's that little mist line, the little drip hose running around the pool. It was set up on timers, so it would go off periodically and keep the gunite wet so it won't dry too quick and won't crack. Once the gunite is cured, they started working on putting up the forms for the coping around the pool. Now, we chose to go with a regular concrete coping matching the house and not with something like brick, but brick is also an option, and there are some other material options out there as well. Next up was pouring the concrete for the decking, and this is another time where having a really good crew and a really good contractor pays off, because this decking ties into all of your drains on all of your decking going around the pool. So any splash out is going to have to go down a drain. You don't want to have pooled up water in places, especially in my case because I have a saltwater pool. You're going to wind up having mineral and content buildup and whatnot if you have low points that shouldn't be there. These guys did an excellent job making sure everything drains correctly, and I have 0 places where I have water pooled up. It always shoots straight down the drains. And really, the last major step is plaster. But there's a bunch of little things that have to happen before this, because as soon as plaster goes in your pool, water has to go in your pool. The plaster cures underwater, and that means all your inspections have to be done. All your electrical inspections, gate inspections, alarm inspections, and anything else is required by your local municipalities need to happen before this thing can be filled with water. Now, this is probably the most annoying part of the whole process, and that is you put water in the pool, it looks like a pool, but you can't swim in it yet. And that's because you've got to fill the thing up and then filter all that plaster dust out, and then every day, a couple times a day, you need to brush the pool and make sure you get all the plaster dust free and clear before you go in it, otherwise you risk doing damage to your finish. So now that the pool's built, what are my takeaways and what's my advice for you if you're thinking about putting in a pool? Now, I've actually had this pool for the last half of last season, all winter, and this season. So I've had some time to live with this pool. So here are my takeaways. And the first thing is something I talked about at the beginning of the video, and that is find the right builder. Now, I got 3 different quotes, And this quote was actually the least expensive quote. The reason it was the least expensive quote was because I think this builder actually understood what I wanted. The other ones wanted to turn my entire backyard into a pool, which is not what I wanted, and they gave me quotes for really large pools. This contractor came in, he actually took the time to talk to me about what I wanted, and I gave him the vision of the backyard, and this is what he came up with, which was exactly what I wanted. So make sure you choose the right builder first. My other bit of advice, which I kind of mentioned at the beginning of the video, is if at all possible, try to find somebody that does pretty much everything in-house. The great part about this job was it got done pretty quick. I've heard horror stories of jobs taking 6, 7, 8 months. This thing took about 2 to get completely done from start to finish. And that's because my builder does everything in-house. It's his own crews that are coming, so he doesn't have to worry about the next crew getting backed up on the way in, or them rescheduling, or conflicts like that. He can line everything up on his own schedule and get it done. Next bit of advice is just keep an eye on things. I had a contractor I trusted, but I still wanted to keep an eye on things, and there were things along the way that I decided I wanted to change. And what was great was I had a very flexible contractor that when I decided instead of building my wall back, I wanted a gate, it was no problem. When I wanted to change some stuff with the tile, no problem. I made some changes with decking and pool shape and whatnot, no problem. I had a very flexible contractor, and that really went a long way in making this thing as successful as it was. My next bit of advice is be prepared for unexpected expenses. Now, if you have a good contractor, these really shouldn't creep up, but things do happen. Now, in my case, the unexpected expenses were because of me. I decided to change some stuff on the project to make things more conducive to what I wanted, and it did add some cost. It wasn't a lot, but just kind of be prepared for that. The other thing with unexpected expenses is once you have this thing, you have to run it and maintain it. Now, I chose to go with a saltwater pool, and if you want to watch a video on all the pros and cons of that, I'll have it linked down below and up here in one of these corners. But the other thing was when we put the cell in, we oversized the cell and we oversized the pump and went with a variable speed pump. This pool actually consumes half the electricity that my old above ground pool did, primarily because of that variable speed pump. But talking about other expenses, you got to make the decision now once it's in whether you're going to hire somebody to take care of your pool or if you're going to do it yourself. And either way, that's an added expense. So you're going to have to look around in your area to find out how much pool maintenance will cost or how much chemicals will cost, because that's going to vary by the size of your pool, but it is an ongoing expense you're going to have to keep up with. My other bit of advice in the design phase is be honest with yourself of what you actually want in a pool. Now, initially in my head, I'm making the entire backyard a pool. And then I really thought about it and realized that's not what we use a pool for. I live just up from the coast. I surf all the time. I've got the biggest pool in the world. Technically, I think the second. I got the Pacific Ocean. So I don't need a humongous pool. I need a pool that my family and my kids' friends can just kind of float around and hang around in. That's why we built a pool this size. That's why I built that big Baja step over there. Another expense to keep in mind is your propane and hamburger and hot dog expense, because you're going to have a lot more pool parties because people are going to want to come over and hang out in your pool. You're going to wind up feeding them. People got to pee. This thing could wind up becoming a great big toilet. So you need to make sure that it's easy for somebody to get from your pool to your bathroom. So if you've got hardwood floors between your door and your bathroom, think about that and how people are going to get dried off and get inside, because the more difficult you make it to go pee on the inside, they're probably going to pee in this thing instead. Heating is something else that you're going to have to think about for your pool. Are you going to run a gas heater, an electric heater, solar heaters, bubble covers, or whatnot? I live in the California desert. There is no need for a heater in this area, so I just use an insulated cover on top of the pool to prevent it from dropping temperature at night and also to hold down on evaporation. If you notice the weird shade lines going over my head, it's because I actually have shade sails over this pool, because this thing will hit 100 during the day during the summertime. So something to think about is, do you need a heater? Do you actually need a heater? And are you in an area where something like shade sails is going to become necessary? Because I actually really like having them up there. It means in the summertime, I put those things up, I can float around this thing all day long and not get sunburned. So something to think about. And if that's something you're going to need, maybe putting the posts in while they're pouring the concrete for your pool might be a good idea. Now, I hope I managed to answer all of your questions about how this process goes if you're deciding to put in an in-ground pool, but I'm sure I missed something, and I'm sure you probably got some more questions. So if you do, leave those comments down below. I'm always going down below and answering those questions in the comment section. Now, if this video helped you out, give it a great big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel if you want more content like this. That stuff really does help support the channel and helps get our videos out there, so we really would appreciate the support. And of course, thanks a lot for watching.